Here are some examples from homework 6 for math 1320. As you can see right here, this is saying simplify the rational expression. So what a rational expression is another way of saying a actual fraction. So right here, we're going to simplify it by dividing both the numerator and denominator by 7. Hence, you got your 2 and your 3. But since you have the same number of y's on both the numerator and the denominator, so on top and the bottom, therefore they're going to cancel out. So your overall answer now is 2x over 3. For your next example, once again, you have to factor. So this is another rational expression. So I'm trying to zoom in and again and zoom out so everybody can see it. Oops, I think I'm doing a little bit too much right there. So be patient. So thank you for being patient. So right here you have to factor out the x squared minus 81 over the x squared plus 9x. Going back to what was covered in homework 5, you're going to make this one polynomial into two binomials. So notice how you have your two x's, so that's where the x's come from, and then you have your 81. So think about what gives you 81, which would be your 9 and your 9. The signs are different because there's no middle term. Therefore, one has to be positive, the other one has to be negative. For your denominator, both terms have x, so you can factor the x out. So now you're left with x plus 9. So notice how you have an x plus 9 both on the top and the bottom. They cancel each other out. Therefore, your overall answer is x minus 9 over x. Now here we go with another rational expression. Now I have to write this on a different sheet because this is a doozy. Here's your actual expression right here. This is given to you. As you can see, you got a lot going on right here. Not only do you have so many exponents, but you got rather larger numbers too. So let's split this up looking at the numerator only. So let's only look at the top part. So if we look at the numerator only, you have 27x to the 4th plus 64x. So I'm going to factor out the x. So once I factor out that x, that's supposed to be a 3 right here. So I made a mistake. And then right here, I messed up somewhere. Where did I mess up at? So we got 27x to the 4th plus 64. Factor out the x. That's right. There's not supposed to be an x right here. So So my apologies for that. This is going to be cube sum, so we're going to follow this formula right here. So once we break all of that down, following x cubed plus bx, where x was going to be your 3x, and then your b was going to be your 4. So I substituted back into this formula, so I got all of that. Yeah, that's a tad bit confusing, so you might need to pause it. But for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. So this is all for your numerator. Next, you're going to look at your denominator. So all of this is your denominator now. So I can factor out a 4x for each one of these. So that brings down to 3x squared minus 8x and then the 16, because you're dividing everything by 4. Now we're going to factor by grouping using the AC method. So let me zoom in real quick. So with the AC method, you have to determine that A is 3, B is negative 8, C is negative 16. And you're going to multiply your last term times your first term and figure out what can give you 48. But if you subtract or add it, it can give you 8. So let me go back over here now. I know this is a tad bit confusing, but please feel free to use MathWay. The PowerPoints are also posted in Canvas. So once you group it, you have the 12 and the 4. So I'm going to group all these by factoring out the 3x, group these by factoring out the 4. Notice that for that particular part, once you do all the factoring, the x4 is part of both of them. So you look on the outside of that. So bring down your 4x. Now you got your 3x plus 4 and your x minus 4. But this is still not done. Now we got to put our numerator and denominator together. So once you do that, you got x times 3x plus 4 times 9x minus 12x plus 16. That's for your numerator. And then your denominator is 4x, 3x plus 4, and x minus 4. Notice how these 3x plus 4's cancel out. The x's cancel out. Therefore, bring down everything else. So for the top part only, you got 9x squared minus 12x plus 16. Then you have your 4 times x minus 4. Now, I know it's kind of frustrating with this problem, especially when we're not meeting physically, but I guarantee that you'll be able to get it. Just take a moment to rewatch the video and look at other examples. Now, let's look at number 4. So again, I got to do a lot of zooming in and zooming out, so my apologies. So here's your actual problem. There's your answer. But let's figure out how they even got that answer. So, first thing I'm going to do is simplify. So the way that I'm going to simplify it is, let's look and see if any of these terms are factors of each other. And they are. So 9 and 27 are both factors of 9 and 3. Then you got 10 and 18. Both of those are factors of 2. So notice how I circled them. So with the 9, I'm going to simplify that by 1. Well, 9 going itself 1 time. 9 can go into 27 3 times. So let me show you what I did. That's 3. That's 1. And then for the 10 and 18, 2 can go into 10 5 times. And then it can go into 18, 9. But let's move on over. With the y's now, you got 1 y up here and 2 y's down there. So you're left with 1 y. And then the x's you're fine. So let's look at that again. So you got the x to the 5th and the 1x. Remember, the y's cancel out now. You brought over that 3. So your final answer is 3x to the 6 over 5. We have another example dealing with rational expressions. Now this is going to be dealing with KFC. I'm not talking about Kentucky Fried Chicken either. With the KFC, K stands for keep, the F stands for flip, and the C stands for change. Again, if y'all doing this while y'all hungry, I know y'all thinking about chicken. So here's the first one. You have your fraction, so I'm going to keep the first fraction, flip the second one, and change your division to multiplication. So now we're going to cross multiply, or either just go across and multiply. So we got 5 times 5 gives you 25. 6 plus 1 gives you 7, therefore you got the x to the 7, and then bring down your y. 18 times 7 gives you 126, so bring all of this over because the 7 doesn't have any variables. Now we got to pay close attention to your exponents. Because you have some on top and the bottom, we can subtract. So 7 minus 2 gives you 5. So since the 7 is bigger, that 5 is going to go on top. Now you have 1 minus 3, which gives you 2. Because the 3 is bigger and it's on bottom, that's where the 2 comes from. Therefore, that's your final answer. We have some more dealing with KFC. So once again, you're going to keep the first one, then flip the second one, and change your multiplication to division to multiplication. But let's break it down a little bit first. So the way I'm going to break it down, I'm going to factor it. So I broke down 15y squared, I've shown you the 2 y's. With the x squared plus 14x minus 49, that can be factored because 49 is a perfect square, which gives you 7, and 7 plus 7 also gives you 14. Therefore, you have your 2 binomials. Over here, we broke down the x squared plus 7x by factoring out of x. So you may see what you have in common already is going to be the x plus 7. Now we're going to do the keep, flip, change. We kept the first fraction and flipped the second fraction. So we got to simplify now. So in order for us to simplify, we know that both 15 and 20, so I'm going to circle these, are divisible by 5. Therefore, you're going to have your 3 and your 4. We also notice that there's a y on the top, y on the bottom. We also see that there's an x plus 7 on the bottom and an x plus 7 on the top. So your final answer is going to be 3xy over 4 times x plus 7. Because you're rewriting everything else that's remaining. So you have the 3, the x and the y left, and then you have x plus 7, then the 4. It doesn't matter what order you put it in, but it tends to be neater when the numbers come first and then your variables go into the same order as your ABCs. Still dealing with rational expressions, we have this one now. So your first step is to find your common denominator. Well, instead of trying to figure out what number can go in both 10 and 6 at the same time, we're going to do it a little bit different. So for this one, notice how I had these two circled. So that means I'm going to multiply. So 6 times 10 gives you 60. And you got x to the second power. Now we're going to cross multiply. So that gives you 50x minus 18x. So far so good. Hopefully it is for everybody so far. So now that we got that, let's subtract those numbers. So once we subtract, we got to do 50 minus 18. And that gives you a particular number. And we got to figure out what that's going to be, y'all. Oops. And we're going to have to factor out everything again. So once you do that, you should have 32x over 60x squared. But I can still simplify that. If I'm not mistaken, 4 can go into both of those. If I'm not mistaken, and it can. So if I simplify both of those by 4, so that be divided by 4, that's also divided by 4. I'm now going to have 8 over 15. And I'm going to write this a little bit different so you can see it. Notice how you got 2 x's. So here's an x, there's an x. It might be a little bit easier for you to see which x's cancel out. So these are gone. So now your final answer is 8 over 15x. So yay! But wait, there's more. Here's another example. I know you're tired of this stuff. Of finding the common denominator. So once again, we're going to multiply our bottom parts out. So that would be x minus 1 times x. That sounds so wrong, saying bottom parts out. So let's multiply the denominators. So now we got x times x minus 1. Then we're going to cross multiply. We're going to have 8x times x. Bring down your plus signs. Then 7 times x minus 1. Using the distributive property now, we're going to go ahead and simplify that. So once we do that, can we simplify this any more? Let's see. Makes you wonder. Makes you wonder. I think that's it. That's the final problem. Ladies, gents, individual, I think that is it. You can't simplify that any further. And if you can simplify it, then I'm just wrong. Please charge that to my heart, not to my mind, or either vice versa, because right now I don't know. But anyway, we can always use math. So let's look at number 9. Here's your doozy right here. So if you say a little prayer, whatever you need to do, because this is quite a bit. So the first thing you need to do is factor it. So here's your initial problem. I want to factor everything out. So now I have 3x times x minus 3, x minus 3. Because the square root of 9 is 3, and then 3 plus 3 gives you 6. So we got all that. So multiply the entire bottom part, all the bottoms, so all the denominators. So when I cross multiply, I'll have this. Therefore, that has that. Then I have to do this, which is all of that. So let's go and see what happened right there. So now that I found the common denominator, and again, it's quite a lot, we use the distributive property for these to figure out how we got that part right here. So using FOIL method for this part only, we got that, but we still got to use the distributive property and then combine like terms. So now we're combining our like terms. We got 3 minus 2, which gives you 1. 9 plus 12, or negative 9 plus 12 gives you 3x. Then bring down to 18. Notice how none of the bottom part changed yet. So right now we're just looking at all of this. Take a breath, take a moment. I know I do. Because the problem is yet to be done. So now we get to factor again. So there was your numerator. Remember those 3x minus 3's on the bottom? Well, this can be factored once we simplify the part in. Think about the factors that can give you 18 if you multiply them, but if you add and subtract them, give you 3. Therefore, you got 6 and 3. Since 6 is the greater number and your middle term is positive, that's what makes that positive. But that term is negative, so therefore the negative went to the 6. Notice how these two cancel out. So now you're left with x plus 6 over x minus 3 over x minus 3. Another way of writing x minus 3 twice is just put it to an exponent of 2. So, woo-saw. We are finished with that particular example for factor. Here's another one. So here's a fraction within a fraction within a fraction. So here you go with all of this. All of that. There goes that good old KFC again. So I'm going to rewrite it. Now the way that I rewrote it, let me go back up here. You had 3 and 14y divided by 6 over 7xy. So if you're using the KFC, you kept your first fraction, flip the second fraction, and change your multiplication. Change your division to multiplication. So that's where all this is coming from. Now you can't see all my scrabble, but I simplified the 3 and the 6 first by dividing 3 by itself, which gave you the 1. 6 divided by 3, which gave you the 2. The same thing with the 7 and 14. 7 was divisible into itself one time, and then it can go into 14 twice. So that's where your numbers are coming from. But look at your variables. You have a y right here and a y right there. So those two y's are gone. So now you're left with 1 times 1, which gives you 1. The x still remains, so it comes down. Then in regards to your numbers, 2 times 2 gives you 4. So your overall answer was x over 4. Yippee! Still not done. Here goes number 11. Woo, you got a lot going on right there. So another way of saying factoring is the same thing as saying division. So what I did was do it a little bit different. Notice how you have x to the 4th power right here, and then you have x to the 3rd. So I literally wrote it in expanded form so you can see your 1, 2, 3, 4 x's and your 1, 2, 3 x's right here. So far so good. Perfect. Voila. Boom, bam, pow. So with the first part, I can factor out an x because it got 1 on the top and 1 on the bottom. We know that 2 can go into 10 5 times. But notice how many x's you have left. So that would be x to the 3rd. Bring down your plus sign. This same 2x can go into this one as well. So you got an x cancel out right here. You know that 2 can go into 20 10 times. And how many x's do you see remaining? You have 2. You are done. You cannot simplify that any further because the exponents are different. Again, factoring is the same thing as saying division. Well, let's look at one more that's dealing with division. Well, the first thing I did was rewrite it. So notice how I put it in fraction form. Second thing I did was factor it out. Now this took a minute because I had to think of something that had to give you 200 if you multiply it together and then still give you 17 if you added or subtracted. Okay, 5 was way too small. Same thing with 10. No way in the world 10 could give you 17 because that's an even number and this is odd. So I had to think about money. I thought about quarters. So I knew that 25 could go into 8. I'm sorry, 25 can go into 200 to 8 times. Notice how your signs are different, therefore your signs are different down here. The sign on the middle term will always take the sign of the greater number, therefore it came with a 25. So what do you think cancels out? That's right, x minus 8, because one is on top, one on the bottom. Final answer is x over 25. So for more clarity, you probably have to Google this and find factors of the 200. So again, I was just thinking about 5 can go into that 40 times. No way that gives me 17. And I'm just showing you where I'm getting the 25 and 8 from y'all. And then I can think about 10 and 20. Still doesn't give me 17. Okay, now I'm just totally getting discouraged using my calculator. That's where the 25 and 8 come from. Because if I subtract those two, that gives me the 17. Here's another example. Dealing with finding your common denominator. Awesome. Well, this time around, we got 3 fractions instead of 2 fractions. And we got to think long and hard of what we can do about finding your common denominators. So, I'm looking at 4x, 6, and 3x. Well, we know it has to be bigger than all 3 of them, and then it has to be something that all 3 are factors of. The closest one I could think of was 12. Yeah, you could think of 24 too, but that takes too long, so we're just going to use 12. The x has to be included because notice how the 6 doesn't have an x. So, multiply everything by 12x. So when you do that, there's a lot of cancellation going on. So 12 is divisible by 4 3 times. Notice how the x's also cancel out. So now that one was a 3. So 3 times 3 gave you the 9. Now we got to move on to here. 6 can go into 12 2 times. 2 times 7 gave you the 14. Bring down your x. Bring down your equal sign. 3 can go into 12 4 times. Therefore, you got 4 times 4, which gives you the 16. Notice how the x's cancel out. So now we're going to combine the like terms because we're trying to solve for x. Subtract 9 from both sides, we gave you 7. Divide both sides now, but I said divide and not subtract. Now divide both sides by 14, you're left with 7 over 14. But you can simplify that, and your final answer will be 1 over 2. Here's your last example. It's given to you as a word problem, and unfortunately you can't see it right now. So when it's your turn to do it, make sure you look at see what the total or what the ratio is first. So your ratio given in this particular example is 5 to 6. What also was given to you was a total of 13,750 students. Well, I'm going to look at it a different way. If I got the ratio already, the ratio as a total would be 11. And where did I get that from? That would be that 5 plus 6, which came from over here. Now I'm going to rewrite it as a proportion. Rewrite it as a proportion because it's asking for how many males. So you're going to have 5 over 11 equals x over 13,750. You're going to cross multiply right here. So you did 5 times 13,750, which gave you 68,750. Then 11 times x, which gave you 11x. Divide both sides now by 11. Your x was 6,250. Now be mindful, your x is your number of males, because you're not looking at the problem because I failed to write it down for you. But that was going to be 5 males to how many females? So inch it back on up. So remember, you had a total of 13,750 people. So you're going to subtract the number of males from that. So now the number of females will be 7,500. Well, that wraps it up for homework 6.